the execution chamber on Threlvane Station, had never held a human before. Ambassador Eth Sur stood behind reinforced glass, claws pressed white against the railing, watching a lone human woman kneel in the center of the chamber with her hands bound behind her back. Guards from 6 different species ringed the room, weapons drawn, none of them quite able to explain why a single unarmed prisoner required this much firepower. Her name is Commander Dana Marsh, the warden said quietly. Outer Rim Coalition. She surrendered without a fight 3 days ago. Then why does she look like she's the one in control? Ayeth asked. Because Dana Marsh was smiling, not the smile of someone broken. The smile of someone who knew something the entire room didn't. You should check your perimeter sensors, she said calmly, to no one in particular. About now, actually. Alarms tore through the station half a second later. Every screen in the execution chamber flickered, then filled with the same image. An entire human fleet, 140 ships strong, decloaking in perfect formation around Threlvane Station. Not attacking, just present. Undeniable. Ayeth's blood ran cold. That's impossible. Our sensors would have detected a fleet that size approaching. They didn't approach, Dana said, still kneeling, still calm. They've been sitting quietly at the edge of your sensor range for 6 days, waiting for me to confirm something first. Confirm what? Dana finally looked up, and for the first time, Ayeth saw something other than calm in her eyes. Something like grief, carefully controlled. Whether the council still had it in them to execute someone for asking a question. The warden's hands trembled over his console. Get the council chair now. Nobody in that chamber yet understood that Dana Marsh's capture had never been an accident. It was the opening move in a plan 4 years in the making, one that would force the galaxy to finally answer for what it had done to humanity 30 years earlier. 4 years earlier, it began not with fleets, but with a question nobody wanted answered. Dana Marsh was 26 years old, a junior logistics officer on the fringe colony of Aldergate when she found the archive. Buried in decommissioned council records servers, her people had salvaged from a scrapped relay station. The files were old, fragmented, and clearly meant to stay buried. They detailed the true reason for humanity's exile from the Outer Rim 3 decades earlier. And it wasn't the official story of unpredictable aggression that every human child had grown up believing. Commander, her aide said, staring at the screen over her shoulder. This says the council knew about the Skarn Reach incursion 2 years before it reached human space. They had the warning. They chose not to share it with us. Dana's hands had gone still on the console. They let an entire fleet get slaughtered defending a border they knew was compromised. Then blamed us for the casualties we took defending it. That single discovery didn't start a war. It started something quieter and far more dangerous to the council's authority. Humanity began asking, loudly and publicly, for the truth. The council's response was swift and predictable. Grand Counselor Threx Vantalis, a towering Skarn diplomat whose entire career had been built on the narrative of humanity's dangerous instability, moved fast to bury the archive's existence. Independent journalists who tried to verify the files vanished from public record. Diplomatic channels to the human coalition went silent. But Threx made one mistake he wouldn't realize for years. He underestimated how patient humanity had become. They're not going to fight us in the open, said Commander Rhea Okonkwo, leader of the Outer Rim Coalition fleet, in a war council held in the shielded depths of a converted mining station. Not yet, so we don't give them a fight to point to. We give them a question they can't bury. Dana, now a rising officer in the Coalition's intelligence division, stepped forward. Then let me be the question. The plan she proposed was audacious enough that half the room initially refused it. She would surrender herself to council custody publicly, with the archive's key evidence encoded into a dead man's release system tied to her own survival. If the council executed her to silence the truth, the evidence would broadcast across every major relay in council space automatically. You'd be betting your life that they don't have the nerve to kill you, Rhea said grimly. No, Dana said. I'd be betting that if they do, the truth matters more than I do. For 3 years, nothing happened. Dana lived quietly on the fringe, gathering allies, refining the encoded release system, waiting for the right moment. The Coalition fleet grew in the shadows, built from salvage and stubbornness, while smaller species across the rim, tired of council neglect, began quietly pledging support to the human cause. Then the Skarn Reach threat returned. Not a rumor this time, but real. Swarming vessels of unknown origin tearing through 3 unprotected border colonies in a single night, exactly as the buried archive had warned might happen again. The council, still unwilling to admit its failures, moved to quarantine the affected sectors and suppress the news. Dana saw her opening. She turned herself in 3 days later, walking into a council outpost alone and unarmed, letting herself be captured exactly as she'd planned. What she hadn't planned for was Ayeth. Ayeth wasn't like most council ambassadors. Young for her position, sharp-eyed, and quietly troubled by inconsistencies she'd noticed in the official record for years, she'd been assigned to oversee Dana's transfer almost by accident. In the 3 days before the execution, she visited Dana's holding cell more than protocol required. "Why confess to nothing?" Ayeth asked during one visit. "You could deny everything. Delay this. Delay helps you, not me," Dana said. "I need the council to make a choice in public, where they can't quietly bury it. Execute me, and the truth comes out anyway. Let me live, and I get to say it myself." Ayeth studied her for a long moment. "You're not afraid to die." "I'm afraid of what happens if nobody ever finds out why my people were really cast out," Dana said. "That's worse." It was that conversation, more than any evidence, that made Ayeth quietly begin digging through the very archive. Dana had risked everything to expose, and what she found confirmed every uncomfortable truth she'd suspected about the leadership she'd sworn to serve. The execution chamber scene was never supposed to reach its final moment. Ayeth made sure of that. 20 minutes before the sentence was to be carried out, she stood before Grand Counselor Threlvane in an emergency session, holding a data core in trembling claws. "I have independently verified the Aldergate archive," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber despite the tremor in it. "Every claim is accurate. We withheld critical intelligence from human forces 30 years ago, then exiled them for the casualties that intelligence gap caused." Threx's composure cracked for the first time in decades. "You would take the word of a human prisoner over 30 years of council record?" "I'd take verified evidence over a narrative built to protect us from our own mistake," Ayeth said. That was the moment the human fleet decloaked around Threlvane Station. Timed, Dana later admitted, to arrive the instant her deadman system detected the council debating her execution, rather than simply carrying it out. Rhea Okonkwo hadn't come to attack. She'd come to make sure that if the council chose violence, the entire galaxy would see it happen in real time. They didn't fire a single shot. They didn't need to. Grand Counselor Threlvane resigned within the week, unable to survive the public reckoning that followed the archive's full release. The council that replaced his leadership did something unprecedented in its history. It issued a formal, recorded acknowledgement of humanity's unjust exile, and reopened the Outer Rim to human governance, not as a conquered territory, but as a full partner in its defense. Dana Marsh stood on the observation deck of Rhea's flagship months later, watching the newly reinforced border fleet take shape along the rim. Human ships alongside a growing coalition of smaller species who'd waited decades for someone powerful enough and patient enough to finally hold the council accountable. Ayeth found her there, no longer an ambassador for a council she no longer fully trusted, but the newly appointed liaison for rim reconstruction. "I still don't understand how you were so certain I'd verify the archive in time," she admitted. Dana smiled, the same calm, knowing smile from the execution chamber. "I wasn't certain. I just believed someone in that room still cared more about truth than comfort. I was willing to bet my life I was right. And if you'd been wrong?" Dana looked out at the assembling fleet, at 30 years of exile finally quietly coming to an end. "Then at least the truth would have outlived me. Some things are worth more than staying alive to see the ending." Behind her, the Rim's newly unified defense fleet turned outward together for the first time. No longer humanity standing alone, and no longer a council pretending the darkness beyond the border wasn't real. The exile was over. What came next would be written by every species patient enough to finally listen.